I gave my son my last name because I gave him everything else too. When Arav was born, the nurse asked me gently if I wanted to wait for the father before signing the birth certificate. I shook my head. There was no father waiting in the hallway, no man pacing with nervous excitement. His father had left 3 months earlier, taking his silence and leaving me with hospital forms and a future I hadn't planned to face alone. So I wrote my name instead, Mira Qureshi, slowly, carefully, as if the ink carried a promise. People warned me. They said a boy without his father's name would grow up feeling incomplete. They said society would be unkind. I believed love could be louder than judgment, stronger than tradition. I believed I could be enough. Life didn't give me space to doubt that belief. I worked mornings at a tailoring shop and nights cleaning office floors. I stitched uniforms while memorizing nursery rhymes. Arav learned his alphabet on the back of fabric order slips. When he fell asleep, his small fingers curled around my last name like it was something solid, something safe. Every document of his childhood carried it: the school admissions, medical records, competition certificates. Arav Qureshi. I watched that name grow straighter, prouder, more confident with each passing year. At parent-teacher meetings, they called my name, and I stood up tall, even when my shoes were worn and my hands smelled of detergent. The first crack appeared when Arav turned 16. A teacher called him by his full name during roll call, and he corrected her quickly. "Just Arav," he said, glancing around the classroom. I noticed the way his ears turned red, the way he avoided my eyes afterward. I told myself it was teenage embarrassment, nothing more. But distance has a way of expanding quietly. By university, his voice had changed, his clothes were sharper, his friends unfamiliar. When he introduced me, I became simply my mom. My name stayed behind his teeth, unspoken. Then he met Ree. Her family name opened doors I had spent years knocking on. Their smiles were polite but measured, their questions carefully empty. The wedding plans unfolded like a performance where every detail mattered, including names. The night before the ceremony, Arav stood before me, adjusting his cufflinks, unable to meet my eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "maybe tomorrow. Don't mention your last name." I laughed, waiting for the joke. He didn't smile back. "It embarrasses me," he whispered, and in that moment, the name I had carried alone finally felt heavy. The wedding hall shimmered like it had been borrowed from another world. Crystal chandeliers hung low, reflecting light off polished marble floors, and soft music floated through the air like practiced happiness. Every chair was wrapped in ivory fabric, every table marked with gold-lettered cards. Names mattered here. Presentation mattered. I sat in the second row. The front row belonged to Ree's parents, their surname printed boldly on the wedding program, repeated like a brand. I searched the booklet once, then twice, before accepting the truth. My name wasn't there at all. I wasn't Mira Qureshi. I was simply Arav's mother, reduced to a role without an identity. Guests leaned toward one another, whispering softly. I caught fragments questions about where I was from, what I did, how I knew the groom's family. No one asked me directly. People rarely ask things they assume they already understand. Arav stood at the altar, flawless in his tailored suit, smiling the smile I had taught him when he was afraid. For a moment, I saw the boy who once waited for me outside night shifts, pretending not to be sleepy. My chest tightened, but I kept my posture straight. Today was not about my hurt. That was what I told myself. When the officiant announced it was time for family speeches, my name was called carefully incomplete. "We invite the groom's mother to say a few words." No last name. I rose slowly. My knees trembled, but my face remained calm. Arav looked relieved when he saw my expression. He thought I would keep it brief, safe, invisible. I won't take much time. I said into the microphone, my voice steady. I prepared something special instead. I nodded toward the technician's booth. The lights dimmed. A video appeared on the massive screen behind me. It opened with shaky footage of a toddler gripping a pencil too tightly, tongue sticking out in concentration as he wrote his name for the first time. The letters were uneven but proud. Arav Qureshi. A soft murmur passed through the crowd. The next clips followed quickly school assemblies, late, night study sessions, me sewing under a single bulb while a young voice recited answers beside me. Documents flashed briefly on screen, forms, certificates, hospital bills. Every single one carried the same surname. The room grew quiet. I watched Arav's smile falter, confusion settling into his eyes. He looked at me then, not with embarrassment, not with anger, but with something close to fear. The video hadn't finished yet, and neither had I. Arav didn't follow me immediately after the video ended. He stayed frozen, a hand frozen mid-cufflink, eyes fixed on the screen. The applause began slowly, polite claps from relatives, tentative gasps from friends, but his gaze never wavered from me. That was when I realized this wasn't just surprise. This was understanding slowly dawning, a recognition that he had never expected. Finally, he walked toward me, each step measured, hesitant, as if approaching a truth he had tried to avoid his whole life. I met him halfway, smiling softly, letting him set the pace. He looked pale, his jaw tight, his hands fidgeting. His polished suit did nothing to soften the tension between us. There were no words yet, only silence thick enough to cut through the chatter of the hall. I didn't mean it like that, he whispered. The words trembled. They were the words of a man who had spent too long trying to erase the person who raised him. I know, I said quietly. My voice carried neither accusation nor anger, only truth. That's what hurts most, not the embarrassment, but forgetting what carried you here. He swallowed hard, and I could see his mind turning, rewinding to childhood nights when I sat beside him through fevers, holding his hand, whispering answers when he couldn't sleep, replaying mornings when I carried him to school because he had missed the bus, memories he had pushed away in his pursuit of elegance, status, and acceptance. Ree stood nearby, holding her bouquet tighter, her eyes wide, unsure what had just unfolded. Her parents shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. For the first time, the shiny perfection of their wedding seemed brittle, like glass under pressure. I reached into my purse and handed Av a thin envelope. His eyebrows knit together as he took it, cautious, wary. I changed my name. I said softly, not out of anger or bitterness, but out of peace. He blinked rapidly. "What do you mean?" he asked, voice almost breaking. "I chose a name that represents who I became while raising you, who I survived to be." I explained, not a name defined by absence, but by everything I built when the world doubted us. Arav's hands shook slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside was a simple legal document confirming the change, a name restored on paper, symbolically and legally. He looked up at me then, tears forming but unspilled, the kind of tears reserved for moments when children finally grasp the cost of unconditional love. "I'm proud of you," I said, touching his face gently, "but pride should never require erasure. You could never erase me. I chose to remind you." For a long moment he simply nodded, letting the truth settle around him, a weight he had not carried before. And in that nod, I realized that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's simply letting the world see the truth that someone else tried to hide. Months passed after the wedding, but the memory of that day lingered like an echo. Arav and I spoke sparingly at first, the conversations careful, measured, as if testing new boundaries. There was no anger, no shouting, only the weight of unspoken truths settling between us like dust on old furniture. One quiet evening, I received a call. Arav's voice was calm, deliberate, carrying the steadiness I had always hoped he would find in himself. "Mom," he said, I changed it back. I closed my eyes, letting a slow, deep exhale escape me. For years, I had carried the burden of a name that had been questioned, minimized, dismissed. I had been proud of it, yes, but I had also feared it would never be honored, never truly recognized. And now, after everything, he had chosen to honor it himself. "Qureshi," he said almost reverently, "if the world questions it, that's their weakness, not ours." I smiled, a quiet, satisfied smile. My revenge had never been about shame or humiliation. It had never been about making him suffer for his words. True revenge, I had learned, was something subtler. It was about remembrance, about truth, about standing tall when others would rather see you small. That name, Qureshi, was more than letters on paper. It was the story of my sleepless nights, my sacrifices, my unwavering presence. It was every time I carried him through hardship, every time I whispered encouragement when no one else did. The name had survived long before it had been respected, and now, finally, it was embraced by the very person who had once tried to distance himself from it. We sat together that night, speaking of simple things, childhood memories, dreams, laughter. But beneath the words there was something else, a reconciliation not just of a mother and her son, but of a name, a legacy, and the quiet triumph of enduring love. Sometimes revenge isn't a fiery confrontation or a public spectacle. Sometimes it's the quiet act of letting the truth speak louder than insult or rejection ever could. By the time Arav called, my vengeance had already done its work. It had reminded him, and the world, of the strength that bore him, nurtured him, and never gave up on him. And so the last name lived on, unshaken and unashamed, no longer a mark of embarrassment, but a testament to resilience. The boy who had once sought to erase it now carried it with pride. The mother who had once been invisible now stood seen, respected, and quietly triumphant. The name chose me long before the world did, and in the end it chose him too.